Welcome to my channel, Advanced Learner Studio.
Today's podcast topic is technology making us smarter or lazier? This is a question that, well, it feels more relevant basically every single day, doesn't it?
It really does. We're just swimming in technology, aren't we?
Completely. I mean, your smartphone is probably in your hand or pocket right now. AI seems to be predicting what we want to search for almost before we think it.
And getting information. It's instant, like turning on a tap.
Exactly. And that brings us to this really fundamental question about our own minds, our own thinking.
Yeah, is all this connectivity, this, limitless access to everything, is it actually making our brains sharper?
Is it genuinely boosting our ability to think deeply, to learn effectively, maybe even to be more creative?
Or is there a flip side? Could it be sort of subtly lulling us into a kind of mental comfort zone?
Making us intellectually complacent, less willing to do the heavy lifting mentally.
That's the core of the debate, I think.
It's a really profound puzzle, and the implications are just massive. It affects, well, everything, how we learn.
Whether that's academic stuff or, trying to get your head around English grammar.
Right. And how we work, how we interact, how we just connect with people in this digital world we're all living in.
Absolutely. So our goal today in this deep dive is to really take the ideas and arguments that have come up in research and discussion and just unpack this really complex relationship. It's definitely not straightforward.
We want to explore those compelling arguments about how technology might be pushing us forward towards more knowledge, more capability.
But also, and this is crucial, look honestly at the ways it could potentially be holding us back, how it might hinder that deep focused thinking, or maybe even make us less good at solving problems independently.
Okay, so let's start on the positive foot. The case for technology as a real catalyst for intellectual growth. One of the most striking points is just the sheer access to knowledge it gives us.
That's undeniable, isn't it? The digital age has, it's fundamentally changed the game. It's basically torn down old barriers.
Like geography or cost. Things that used to limit who could learn what.
Exactly. And now, vast, almost unimaginable amounts of information and educational resources are available to, billions of people. It's a democratization of knowledge on a scale we've never seen before in human history.
It really is like the biggest library imaginable, but it fits in your pocket and you can access it from anywhere. You see examples like those massive open online courses, MOOCs.
Oh, yeah. Platforms like Coursera, EDX, Khan Academy, even university-specific platforms. These aren't just little extras. They offer full-blown courses.
Sometimes with lectures straight from professors at, top universities around the globe.
And the sheer variety is mind-boggling. You can dive into super complex science like quantum mechanics if you really want to.
Or explore really nuanced humanities topics like post-colonial literature or, deep philosophical debates.
Stuff that maybe just 20 or 30 years ago was pretty much locked away in university libraries, accessible only to a few.
And if your goal is specifically mastering English, especially at a higher level, this is just incredible.
Oh, absolutely. A goldmine. You get access to authentic, challenging materials.
Things like full university lectures, published research papers, articles from places like The Economist or the New York Review of Books, podcasts on really specialized subjects.
And consuming that kind of material, it exposes you directly to sophisticated vocabulary, complex sentence structures, different ways of arguing and explaining things, the kind of language you need for academic or professional success.
It's English as it's actually used by experts in their fields. You just can't beat that for learning.
And then there's the power of search engines. Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, whatever you use.
Instant gratification for curiosity, right?
Pretty much. If you hit a tricky grammar point while reading, or you encounter some complex idea you don't quite get, bam, you can look it up immediately.
And within seconds, you've got access to maybe scholarly articles, expert blog posts, discussion forums where people are hashing it out.
It creates this amazing feedback loop. You have a question, you seek the answer, you find it, maybe that sparks another question.
It really encourages that self-directed learning approach. You become the driver of your own learning journey, following your interests.
Think about researching a complex topic, say, the ethics of gene editing. A quick search brings up maybe a scientific paper full of data alongside an opinion piece from a newspaper and perhaps a blog post from an ethicist.
And comparing those sources isn't just about gathering facts. It's practice and critical evaluation, isn't it?
Totally. You're forced to look at the different styles, think about who wrote it, what their potential angle might be.
Is this based on evidence, or is it more of an emotional appeal? What's the difference between, say, a peer-reviewed study and an editorial?
And honing those analytical skills is vital, not just for understanding the world, but for communicating effectively yourself, like building a strong evidence-based argument in an essay or presentation.
Okay, but there's a catch, right? The material definitely highlights a pretty major downside to all this easy access.
Yes, the elephant in the digital room. Misinformation.
It's everywhere. Because the barriers to publishing are so low now, basically anyone can put anything online.
Which makes digital literacy absolutely essential. It's not just a nice-to-have skill anymore. It's fundamental.
It's not enough just to find information. You absolutely have to be able to figure out if it's trustworthy. Can you actually believe what you're reading or watching?
And that means developing some specific techniques, like really looking into the author. Who are they? Do they have expertise in this area?
Or checking the claims. Does this data match up with what other reliable sources are saying? Or does it seem way off?
And being aware of potential bias. Is the author or the website trying to push a particular agenda? Are they funded by someone with a vested interest?
These critical evaluation skills are not just about being a smart consumer of information either. They make you a better producer too.
Definitely. If
Yes.
you're writing something yourself, say for work or study, you need to use credible sources and be able to justify why they're credible. It adds weight to your own arguments.
There's an example about academic writing. Say you're exploring the impact of social media. You find a shocking statistic on some random blog.
And a different, maybe more nuanced statistic in a published research study. Evaluating those requires careful language.
Right. You might say something like, while some online sources claim X, peer-reviewed research suggests Y based on a larger sample size. That kind of phrasing shows critical engagement.
And it sharpens both your thinking and your ability to communicate precisely and persuasively.
The material also includes some case studies, like one about someone using an online platform, maybe Coursera, to study academic writing itself.
These platforms often provide a very structured learning path. You get video lectures, readings, quizzes.
And importantly, assignments that require you to actually produce written work, essays, reports, summaries.
This structure immerses you in the specific way people talk and write in that field, the vocabulary, the sentence patterns, the way arguments are built.
And doing the assignments forces you to practice using that specific kind of language. Plus, many platforms have discussion forums.
Right, where you interact with other learners, ask questions, debate ideas. That's practice in, more spontaneous communication, applying what you're learning.
So the technology enables it, but the real learning comes from that active engagement, grappling with material, writing, discussing. It boosts both your knowledge and your language skills, assuming you actually dive in.
Okay, so moving beyond just access, let's talk about how technology can provide tools that seem designed to, boost our cognitive processes directly, augmenting our thinking.
Like giving our brains a bit of a superpower.
Yeah.
Or at least a very efficient assistant.
Something like that. Examples include those productivity apps, Notion, Evernote, Trello, Asana.
There are loads.
Powerful organizers, basically.
Yeah, they help you wrangle huge amounts of information. You can manage daily to-do lists, plan out complex projects step by step, create detailed study schedules.
Outline research papers, categorize notes. For language learning, especially at an advanced level where you're juggling grammar, vocab, listening, speaking, they could be amazing. You could use them to, say, categorize new vocabulary by theme, link grammar exercises to specific rules, schedule spaced repetition reviews, or even outline arguments for a debate club practice.
It helps bring order to the chaos, streamlines the process.
And then there are tools specifically for language that act as cognitive enhancers. Think about sophisticated grammar checkers.
Like Grammarly or maybe Pro Writing Aid. They go way beyond basic spell check now.
Oh, definitely. They give real-time feedback on sentence structure, word choice, clarity, conciseness, even things like the tone of your writing.
And the key is, it's not just about clicking accept suggestion. You have to engage with it, right?
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
You look at the suggestion and think, okay, why is it suggesting I change that? Oh, I see, using an active verb here makes it punchier. Or, this phrase is a bit redundant. How can I say it more directly?
That analytical process helps you internalize the patterns. You learn from the feedback, improving your writing beyond just that one document.
Then you've got learning apps that deliberately incorporate ideas from cognitive science, like Duolingo or Memrise. using spaced repetition for vocabulary.
Right, that's the idea that reviewing information at increasing intervals helps lodge it in long-term memory more effectively.
Exactly. It's based on how our memory actually seems to work. The app figures out when you're likely to forget a word and prompts you just before that happens. It's efficient.
This ties into something called cognitive load theory, doesn't it?
It does. The basic idea is that our working memory, the mental space where we actively process information, is limited. Learning happens best when we don't overload it.
So if a tool handles the mundane stuff like organizing notes or catching simple typos,
It reduces what's called extraneous cognitive load. That's the mental effort spent on things other than the actual learning task.
which frees up more of your precious brain power.
Precisely. More resources available for the difficult parts. Understanding complex concepts, analyzing texts, thinking creatively, figuring out tricky grammar.
And artificial intelligence takes this even further, potentially. AI tutors, for instance.
Yeah, the potential for personalization is huge. And AI could, in theory, adapt exercises to your specific weaknesses in real time.
Like if it notices you keep messing up, say, the third conditional.
It could instantly generate a bunch of targeted practice exercises just on that specific structure, helping you master it faster because the practice is so focused.
There's even a neuroscientific angle mentioned, suggesting that interacting with these dynamic digital tools might stimulate brain pathways involved in learning and memory.
It's an emerging area, but the idea is that interactive, responsive environments might engage our brains differently, perhaps more effectively than just passively reading a textbook.
What about those brain training apps like Lumosity? There's always debate about those.
There is. The scientific consensus on whether they broadly improve intelligence is still out. But the material suggests they might at least encourage specific cognitive skills like focus, mental flexibility, or task switching.
And there's an interesting idea about combining them with language practice.
Right. Imagine doing a visual puzzle on one of these apps, but at the same time, you have to describe your strategy out loud in English.
Wow, that sounds hard. Forcing your brain to juggle visual processing, problem solving, and linguistic output simultaneously.
Exactly. It builds both cognitive agility and the ability to think on your feet linguistically. Good practice for real-world situations like fast-paced meetings or giving impromptu answers.
The case study using a grammar tool really drives this home. A learner uses something like Grammarly on an essay.
And instead of just accepting changes, they analyze them. Why is this passive sentence flagged? How can I make it active? Why is this word considered vague? What's a more precise alternative?
That active analysis helps them internalize more advanced vocabulary, sophisticated grammar, and clearer writing principles. It's cognitive augmentation in action.
Okay, beyond individual tools, technology has also revolutionized how we connect and collaborate across the globe. This is another huge boost for intellectual growth.
We're all pretty used to Zoom, Teams, Google Meet now, aren't we?
Totally. These platforms just erase distance. You can have a real-time conversation with someone on the other side of the planet,
Including native English speakers you might never meet otherwise.
which provides incredibly valuable practice in spontaneous, real conversation. It's one thing to practice dialogues from a book.
It's quite another to react to unexpected questions, express complex thoughts on the fly, navigate misunderstandings, all in real time. That's where real fluency develops.
And platforms like Tandem or HelloTalk are built specifically for that language exchange.
Connecting you with peers internationally, right, for practice.
Yeah, through text, audio, video, whatever works. And doing that exposes you to a huge variety of accents, slang, colloquialisms, cultural nuances, and communication.
Things you just don't get from standard learning materials. It really refines your listening skills and your ability to adapt your own speaking.
Imagine discussing a complex topic like, say, global economic policy or cultural differences with someone from a completely different background. You're pushed to articulate sophisticated ideas and understand diverse perspectives.
Even social media platforms like X or Reddit can be places for intellectual exchange, despite their issues.
Definitely. There are countless online communities focused on specific academic subjects, professional fields, even hobbies that require complex discussion.
Participating in those forums means practicing written argumentation, responding thoughtfully to others, engaging in debate.
You learn to express yourself clearly, often adhering to the specific norms or standards of that particular community. It's practice in adapting your communication style.
Collaborative platforms also show this power. Things like GitHub, where developers work together on code.
Or Zooniverse, where ordinary people contribute to real scientific research by classifying images or transcribing data. citizen science.
Engaging with those kinds of platforms builds specialized vocabulary, sometimes highly technical language, and participating forces you to describe complex things precisely.
And this whole idea of virtual communities fostering cultural exchange comes up again. You're constantly encountering English as a global language, used in countless different ways by people from diverse backgrounds.
That prepares you so well for the reality of using English in international settings, and it builds intercultural competence, which is a really valuable skill.
The language exchange case study makes this point strongly. Regular chats with a native speaker don't just polish your grammar, they teach you natural expressions, conversational flow, rhythm, intonation.
It boosts your confidence and your practical ability to actually use the language in real situations.
And finally, technology is profoundly reshaping learning itself, strongly backing the idea of lifelong learning, which is becoming essential, right? The world changes so fast.
Absolutely. You can't just stop learning after school anymore.
And technology provides amazing resources for this. Think about online certifications or professional development courses.
Platforms like LinkedIn Learning, Coursera again, Google's career certificates.
These let you learn entirely new job skills. Digital marketing, data analysis, project management, you name it, often while improving your English at the same time.
Because the courses are often in English, using the specific terminology of that field.
Exactly. You're learning the skill and learning how to talk and write about it professionally in English. You pick up industry jargon, practice writing reports or emails in that context.
Just learning to navigate all these different platforms and software interfaces, that itself builds a kind of mental flexibility, doesn't it?
It does. It's like constantly adapting to new tools, which mirrors the real world where you always have to adjust your approach, your communication for different situations or audiences.
Technology also makes interdisciplinary learning much easier. You could be studying, say, artificial intelligence using English resources, broadening both your tech knowledge and your advanced English vocabulary simultaneously.
And the material mentions micro-credentials too. Shorter, really focused online courses.
Like getting a specific certificate in maybe social media advertising?
Yeah, something very targeted. It teaches you the practical skills and the specific language, the buzzwords, the concepts used in that niche.
The case study about an online course on presentation skills is a great example. You learn how to structure a talk, use persuasive language, handle visuals, engage an audience.
All through online modules and maybe practice sessions, it directly improves high-value communication skills and confidence, showing how tech supports very practical, ongoing learning.
Okay, wow. So we've built a pretty strong case for technology as this incredible engine for learning and intellectual growth. The access, the tools, the connections, the lifelong learning support, it's really compelling.
It absolutely is. The potential is enormous.
And it's a big but. The material is very clear that there's another side to the coin. The very things that make technology so convenient and powerful
Can also potentially lead to a kind of intellectual laziness, mental complacency.
This is where that term cognitive offloading comes in, right?
Yes, that's presented as a central mechanism for how technology might inadvertently make us, well, lazier thinkers.
So it's about how we use it, not just that we use it.
That's the key idea. It's about relying too much on external tools for tasks our brains could do and perhaps should do for exercise.
Like reaching for the calculator for simple sums you used to do in your head.
Or relying totally on spell check without ever thinking about the spelling rules yourself. Or using GPS for every single journey without trying to build a mental map.
And the argument is, if you constantly outsource that mental effort, the underlying skill doesn't get practiced and potentially weakens.
Precisely. Mental muscles need exercise, just like physical ones. If you never do mental arithmetic, you get rusty. If you don't consciously engage with spelling or navigation, those abilities might fade.
And for language learners, the risk is over-relying on things like translation apps or AI writing assistants.
Yes. These tools can be fantastic aids, don't get me wrong. But if you use them to completely bypass the struggle of figuring out grammar or memorizing vocabulary yourself,
You miss the actual learning part. You get the answer instantly, but you skip the valuable mental process of working it out.
the material brings in the dual process theory from cognitive science here, often linked with Daniel Kahneman.
System 1 and System 2 thinking.
That's the one. System 1 is fast, intuitive, automatic, recognizing faces, understanding simple sentences. System 2 is slow, effortful, analytical, solving complex problems, writing essays, deep analysis.
And the worry is that text convenience pushes us toward relying too much on the easy, automatic System 1.
And neglecting the harder but crucial System 2 thinking that's necessary for deep learning and critical thought. Quick answers feel good, but they don't always build deep understanding.
This connects to the impact of all the bite-sized content too, right? Short videos, social media feeds.
Yes, the constant stream of easily digestible, rapidly changing information. Our brains get used to that quick-hit novelty.
Which can make it genuinely harder to focus on things that require sustained attention.
Absolutely. Things like reading a long, dense academic article, working through a complex novel, or even following a detailed argument in a lecture. Our focus muscles get weak.
There's research mentioned on deep reading, that immersive focused reading where you really analyze and connect with the text.
And the suggestion is that our common online habit of skimming, scanning, jumping around might actually be eroding our ability to do that kind of deep reading.
Which is a major concern if your goal involves understanding complex ideas, literature, or even just subtle nuances in advanced language use.
And the subtopic on memory links back to cognitive offloading too. If we know we can instantly look up anything, do we bother remembering it?
Relying on digital notes, reminders, search engines, it might mean our own working memory doesn't get the workout it needs.
That's the potential risk. The act of actively retrieving information from your own memory strengthens that memory. If you always relied on an external device, that strengthening process doesn't happen as much.
So you might struggle more to recall vocabulary or grammar rules when you don't have the tool, like in an exam or a spontaneous chat.
Which is why strategies like using traditional flashcards sometimes, or deliberately practicing recall without looking at your notes, can still be really valuable.
The case study on overusing translation apps illustrates this perfectly. You face a tricky sentence in English, you plug it into a translator, get the gist quickly.
But you bypass the valuable work of analyzing the structure, guessing word meanings from context, looking up individual words to understand their full meaning.
It gives you a fast answer, but it doesn't build your independent reading comprehension skills nearly as effectively. It highlights that need for balance use tools, but don't let them replace the core effort.
Okay, so beyond just making us maybe passively consume information, could technology also be undermining our ability to solve problems independently?
Like, if AI can write the essay for you or draft the email.
You might skip the crucial thinking steps involved. Structuring the argument, synthesizing information yourself, finding your own unique angle or solution.
And relying on templates for everything, presentations, reports, even creative work could lead to less originality.
It could. If everyone uses the same framework, things start to look the same.
Yeah.
And it might leave you less prepared when you face a problem that needs a completely fresh, custom approach.
There's also a point about automation in the workplace. If machines handle all the routine problem solving,
do humans get fewer chances to build those skills themselves? Skills like resilience, creative thinking, adaptability that come from tackling challenges. It could limit practice in harder to automate areas like negotiation or strategic analysis.
And this ease of finding answers online fosters that copy-paste mentality sometimes.
That's a real concern. It's so easy to find something and just reproduce it, which challenges intellectual honesty and the development of genuine understanding and original thought.
The subtopic on creativity directly addresses this. If we lean too heavily on AI for content generation,
does it stifle our own creative spark? Especially if you're trying to develop your own voice, your own style, say, in writing. Simply using AI output isn't really your creation.
The suggestion is maybe use AI for brainstorming, getting ideas flowing.
But then do the actual crafting yourself. Inject your own personality, your perspective, your unique way of saying things.
The AI-generated essay case study makes this point well. The output might be flawless grammatically,
but it often lacks that spark, that personal insight, that unexpected connection that makes writing truly compelling and original. Using AI as a starting point, maybe for an outline, but then writing it yourself leads to a far better, more intellectually engaging result. Then we move into the social and emotional side effects. The idea that spending so much time interacting via screens might reduce face-to-face time.
Which has obvious implications for practicing spoken language, right?
Huge implications. Less real-world conversation means less practice with fluency, pronunciation, intonation, reading body language.
And those subtle conversational skills like turn-taking, interrupting politely, understanding tone of voice.
Things that are really hard to learn from a screen alone. And some research suggests that primarily text-based communication might even chip away at empathy, because you miss all those nonverbal cues.
Empathy being so important for understanding different viewpoints and having nuanced conversations.
And then there's the issue of social media algorithms creating echo chambers.
Where you mostly see stuff that confirms what you already believe.
Exactly. It connects you with like-minded people and filters out opposing views. Which feels comfortable, but
It limits your exposure to diverse perspectives. It makes it harder to grapple with complex issues where there isn't one easy answer. It can kind of stunt your intellectual growth by keeping you in a bubble.
and psychologically, the constant notifications, likes, shares, they create this dopamine feedback loop.
Giving you little bursts of pleasure, making you want to keep checking.
Yes, and that prioritizes instant gratification over the sustained, sometimes difficult effort needed to truly master something complex, like a language.
The subtopic on emotional intelligence connects back to empathy. Fewer rich, face-to-face interactions might mean fewer opportunities to develop this crucial skill.
Whereas actively practicing empathy in real conversations builds communication competence. That's why complementing online learning with offline things like study groups or real-world meetups can be so valuable. It fosters emotional connection too.
The echo chamber case study is revealing. If you only follow sources that agree with you, you miss out on encountering new ideas, new vocabulary, new ways of arguing.
Deliberately seeking out different viewpoints, even ones you disagree with, forces you to think more critically and practice articulating more balanced, nuanced arguments.
And finally, perhaps the most common complaint: digital distraction and fragmented attention.
Oh, the constant battle. Notifications popping up, the urge to quickly check email or social media, juggling multiple tabs and apps.
It makes sustained focus incredibly difficult.
And research confirms it. These interruptions increase cognitive load. Every time you switch tasks, your brain has to reorient, which takes effort and time. It reduces efficiency.
And it makes it hard to stay coherent when you're doing something complex, like writing a detailed analysis or even just following a long conversation.
Plus, the very design of many platforms is addictive, engineered to keep you clicking, which can easily lead to procrastination.
You sit down to study, and suddenly an hour has vanished down a rabbit hole of cat videos or news headlines.
It undermines the discipline needed for deep work. The subtopic on attention span notes this widespread concern and stresses that focus is a skill we now need to actively train.
Techniques like the Pomodoro method-focused work, bursts, then breaks, or creating tech-free study zones.
Exactly. Conscious strategies to fight back against distraction and build concentration, which is vital for things like exams or timed writing tasks.
The notification overload case study shows this clearly. Someone struggling with a timed task because their phone keeps buzzing.
Simply turning off notifications and maybe using a focus app makes a dramatic difference. Better concentration, better quality work in the allotted time.
Okay, so we've really dug into both sides now. The incredible potential of technology to boost our intellect and the very real risks of it encouraging mental laziness or fragmentation. It truly seems like a double-edged sword.
It really does. It's not a simple good or bad situation. It's all about the balance, the interaction between the user and the tool.
Which puts the focus squarely on us, the users. It's about being intentional, strategic in how we engage with technology.
Absolutely. It's about actively choosing to use these powerful tools to our advantage while consciously guarding against the potential downsides.
So revisiting those positive examples, vocabulary apps, online courses, their real value depends on how you use them. Are you actively engaging or just passively consuming?
And it means deliberately seeking out high-quality, challenging material online. Not just the easy stuff, engaging with it critically.
And crucially, making sure you still do the work yourself sometimes. Independent practice.
Yes. Writing without leaning too heavily on AI, having conversations without scripts, trying to solve problems with your own brain first before reaching for a digital shortcut, maintaining that independent effort.
Educators play a big role here too, designing tasks that require critical thinking with technology, not just using it passively.
Like analyzing online sources for bias, collaborating on complex virtual projects, using tools creatively.
And maybe even encouraging reflection. Just thinking about your own tech use, how did it help or hinder you today, can build awareness.
The idea of blended learning really captures this balance, combining the best of both worlds.
Using digital tools for their strengths, maybe efficient drills, access to lectures.
But combining them with offline methods, face-to-face discussion, problem solving, with pen and paper, real-world practice, it creates a more robust, holistic approach.
The blended learning case study showed that perfectly apt for drills plus conversation group led to gains in both specific skills and overall fluency.
Looking bigger picture, at work and society, technology reshapes things constantly. Automation might free us up for creativity.
But we need to make sure core skills don't atrophy. And mastering digital communication emails, virtual meetings, collaboration platforms is just essential now for most jobs.
And we can't forget the digital divide. Unequal access is still a major barrier to opportunity for many people worldwide.
Understanding that issue, being able to talk about it, advocating for digital equity, that's part of being an informed citizen too.
The workplace communication subtopic highlights adapting your style, formal emails versus quick chats. And the virtual presentation case study shows how tech itself can be used to practice and refine those vital professional skills.
So a lot of it comes down to mindful technology use, being conscious, being intentional.
Setting boundaries, turning off those notifications when you need to focus, scheduling tech time instead of letting it constantly interrupt, maybe limiting recreational screen time.
It's about taking control rather than letting the tech control you.
And deliberately engaging with challenging online content. Reading long articles, tackling complex digital texts, building mental resilience against that pull of easy gratification.
And underpinning all of this is digital literacy, not just knowing how to click buttons.
But understanding algorithms, critically evaluating sources, spotting misinformation, understanding bias, these skills are paramount.
Because they translate directly into core intellectual skills like analysis, synthesis, argumentation. Being able to weigh evidence from different sources is fundamental.
The digital literacy subtopic emphasizes this, evaluating content, comparing sources. The case study showed how systematically doing that improves analytical writing.
And briefly, there are psychological aspects too. Information overload leading to decision fatigue.
Yeah, choosing which tool or resource to use can be overwhelming. Having clear goals helps manage that.
And culturally, tech exposes us to global English and diverse cultures, which is great.
But we also need to actively seek diversity to avoid those filter bubbles and homogenization.
Psychological resilience comes into using techniques like mindfulness to manage digital overload, stay focused.
The mindfulness case study showed how breaks for focus helped with concentration and stress on demanding tasks.
So wrapping this all up, the big picture seems clear. The question, smarter or lazier, doesn't have a simple answer. It's complicated.
It really is. Technology offers incredible empowerment, but it also presents genuine risks. It's a dynamic interplay.
We've seen how it can massively enhance intellect. That amazing access to knowledge, tools that augment cognition, global collaboration, support for lifelong learning.
But we've also seen the potential downsides. Cognitive offloading, maybe weaker problem-solving skills, social impacts, constant distraction.
So the real takeaway, the crucial point for you listening, seems to be that the outcome isn't automatic. It depends entirely on how you choose to use the technology.
It's about consciously deciding to use these tools to expand your mind, sharpen your skills, engage deeply with ideas, connect meaningfully.
While at the same time, actively protecting and nurturing your own independent thinking, your critical faculties, your ability to focus.
Developing mindful habits, using balanced approaches, building strong digital literacy. These are the keys to making sure technology serves your growth.
Rather than letting it lead you down a path of comfortable mental stagnation.
And that final thought is really powerful. The choice is ultimately yours. Every day, with every interaction. Will you wield technology intentionally to learn and understand more deeply?
Or will you let its conveniences lull you into complacency? It's a constant negotiation, isn't it? But navigating it thoughtfully is how you get smarter, learn better, and communicate more effectively in this connected world.
Thinking critically about your own technology use is such a vital part of that learning journey. If you found this exploration interesting and want to dive deeper into more topics with us, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. You've joined us for a new deep dive.
Great to be diving in.
Today we're tackling a question that's, well, it's truly fundamental, isn't it? Something that shapes our experience of the world in ways we probably rarely even stop to consider.
Absolutely. We're talking about how language, the very tool we use constantly, influences the way we think and perceive reality itself.
It's such a powerful concept. We use language every single waking moment, but its influence seems to go so much deeper than just, forming sentences.
It really does. It's deeply intertwined with our internal landscape, our cognition, how we process everything around us.
And in this deep dive, we're going to be exploring this really intricate relationship, looking at it from lots of different angles. We've got some fascinating insights to draw on that really push us to look closer at language.
Yeah, beyond just communication.
Exactly. Our mission here is to unpack these ideas together, understand not just that language affects thought, which maybe seems intuitive, but how it does it and why. We'll be digging into some surprising details, some unexpected connections.
And hopefully making it all clear and relevant for you, our listener, helping you navigate information, communication, maybe even your own thoughts with a bit more awareness of these underlying mechanics.
Right. Let's get started. Let's begin this exploration.
Okay, where should we start? The foundations.
Yeah, let's unpack this relationship, starting with the big foundational ideas in this field. And the starting point for so much of this discussion often seems to be the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Ah, yes, Sapir-Whorf. Named after the linguists Edward Sapir and his student Benjamin Lee Whorf. They were really pioneers back in the day, suggesting that the structure of a language doesn't just mirror reality.
It does more than reflect.
They proposed it might actively shape how its speakers perceive and think about that reality. A pretty radical idea at the time.
And I think I remember reading this hypothesis isn't just one single thing. It's usually talked about in two forms, a stronger one and a weaker one.
That's the common way to frame it, yes. The stronger version is called linguistic determinism. And, well, it's quite radical.
How radical are we talking?
It basically posits that language entirely determines thought, completely dictates it. In this view, the structure and vocabulary of your language set the absolute boundaries of what you're even capable of thinking or understanding.
Wow. Hold on. So if your language doesn't have a specific word or, say, a grammatical structure for a concept, you just couldn't think that concept at all. That feels incredibly limiting.
It does feel limiting, doesn't it? And that's precisely why this strong version, linguistic determinism, is largely, well, not accepted in modern linguistics or cognitive science.
Why not? What's the evidence against it?
The empirical evidence just doesn't really support it.
Yeah.
Humans clearly demonstrate the capacity to think about concepts that are difficult to put into words in their native language. We can imagine things beyond our current linguistic toolkit. We can borrow words. We can create new ones to express novel ideas.
Right, like inventing scientific terms or finding ways to talk about new technologies.
Exactly. Thought isn't strictly caged by language in that absolute deterministic sense. People can think outside the linguistic box, so to speak.
Okay, so linguistic determinism is maybe more of a historical starting point, a sort of extreme position to react against.
You could see it that way. It pushed the conversation forward.
So the weaker version is the one that holds more water today.
Correct. That's linguistic relativity. This version is much more nuanced. It proposes that language doesn't strictly determine thought, but it influences it.
Influence, not determination. Okay.
Yeah, it guides, it biases, it affects our cognitive processes to varying degrees. It might make certain ways of thinking easier or faster, or perhaps more habitual for speakers of one language compared to another.
So it kind of nudges your thinking in certain directions.
That's a good way to put it. And this version, linguistic relativity, is supported by a pretty significant body of empirical evidence that's been gathered over many decades of research.
That distinction, influence versus determination, feels really crucial here.
It is. It's the core of the modern debate.
And Whorf himself, didn't he offer examples to try and illustrate this influence? I remember something about his work on the Hopi language.
Yes, Whorf did spend time studying the Hopi language, spoken by a Native American group in the southwestern U.S. He famously contrasted its structure, particularly how it dealt with time, with languages like English.
How did he see them as different?
Well, English, like many Indo-European languages, uses explicit tense markers, very heavily past, present, future. We have verb conjugations, specific adverbs of time.
Like yesterday, today, tomorrow?
Exactly. They clearly partition time into these distinct segments. And this grammatical structure often leads us to conceptualize time as, well, a linear sequence, like a timeline stretching from the past through the present moment and into the future.
Yeah, we even talk about saving time, spending time, running out of time, like it's a commodity or a line we move along.
Precisely. Whorf, observing Hopi, suggested their language placed much less emphasis on these distinct, bounded temporal segments. He argued that Hopi grammar focused more on things like duration, intensity, and the ongoing or cyclical nature of events.
Cyclical, like seasons, day and night.
Think about natural cycles, yes. He suggested that their language, by not structurally forcing speakers to constantly chop time into past, present, future boxes in the same way English does, might encourage a different cognitive feel for time, perhaps more like a continuous unfolding process.
A continuous flow rather than a segmented line.
That was Whorf's proposal. Now, it's important to say his interpretation of Hopi has been debated quite a bit by later linguists. Some question the accuracy of his analysis.
So it's controversial.
The specifics of the Hopi case are, yes, But the core idea that the way a language structures time grammatically can bias how its speakers think about time, that idea has actually found support in more modern controlled research.
Ah, okay. So the principle might hold even if the original example is debated. And that modern research you mentioned, some of it is really compelling, right? Like the studies by Lera Boroditsky on how different languages use spatial metaphors for time.
Yes, Boroditsky's work provides some of the clearest, most direct experimental evidence for linguistic relativity in action, especially regarding abstract concepts like time.
So how does that work? What did she find?
Well, think about how we talk about time in English. We overwhelmingly use horizontal spatial metaphors. We look forward to the future, we think back on the past, we put unpleasant things behind us.
Right, time moves forward, like along a line in front of us. Or maybe left to right on a calendar.
A horizontal axis, essentially. Now, compare this to Mandarin Chinese. While Mandarin speakers can use horizontal metaphors, they also very commonly use vertical metaphors for time.
Vertical? How does that work?
The word for up, sheng, can refer to the previous week or month, and the word for down, shaf, can refer to the next week or month.
Wait, so past is up, future is down. That flips our usual spatial understanding completely.
But doesn't it? Past events are up, future events are down, like time is stacked vertically.
Okay, that's fascinating linguistically, but did it affect how people think?
That's what Boroditsky tested. She ran experiments where she presented Mandarin and English speakers with questions about temporal relationships, like asking if March comes earlier than April. Crucially, sometimes the visual prompt was arranged vertically and sometimes horizontally.
And what happened?
She found that Mandarin speakers were consistently faster at correctly answering these time questions if the visual information was presented along a vertical axis. English speakers, on the other hand, were faster if it was presented along a horizontal axis.
Wow, seriously. So the common way your language talks about time using space horizontally for English, often vertically for Mandarin, actually influences how quickly your brain processes that information when it's laid out spatially.
That's exactly what the findings suggest. It indicates that our habitual linguistic framing of abstract concepts like time isn't just, a cute way of talking. It can subtly influence the underlying cognitive processing, the efficiency with which we handle related information.
That's really where it gets interesting for me. It's not just abstract philosophy, it's measurable differences in cognitive speed.
Exactly. It's strong evidence that language doesn't just label our thoughts. It can actively participate in shaping how those thoughts are processed.
Which leads us nicely into maybe a more obvious way language shapes thought. Vocabulary. The actual words we have.
Vocabulary is definitely the most intuitive connection for many people. The words available in your language are, essentially, the primary tools you use to define, categorize, and make sense of the reality around you.
And if you don't have a ready-made word for something,
it's often harder to talk about it easily, maybe harder to mentally isolate it as a distinct concept, or perhaps less likely to notice it in the first place.
And languages differ hugely in their vocabularies, don't they? Especially in specific areas or domains, this idea of lexical specificity.
That's the term, yes. Different languages carve up the world differently with their words. They have varying levels of detail in their vocabulary for particular domains that are perhaps culturally important or environmentally relevant.
And this difference in detail can really influence perception.
Significantly. It influences how speakers perceive and categorize things within that specific domain.
The classic example that always comes up here is color.
It's a fantastic example because color perception itself, the physics and physiology of seeing light wavelengths, is universal. But how we categorize those colors into words is definitely not.
Right. So in English, we basically have one common word for blue. We can say light blue or dark blue, but the core word is blue.
Correct. But as numerous studies have highlighted, Russian makes a mandatory distinction. It has two separate basic color terms for what English speakers generally just call blue. Sini for darker blues and Goluboy for lighter blues.
They're not just modifiers like light or dark, they're considered fundamentally different color categories in Russian.
That's right. They're as distinct as, say, red and pink might feel to an English speaker. Russian speakers are linguistically trained from childhood to see these as two core categories.
Okay, so the languages are different. Does it change how they see blue?
This is where Boroditsky's research comes in again. Her studies, and others, confirmed that this linguistic distinction has real cognitive consequences. They tested Russian and English speakers on their ability to discriminate between different shades of blue. They found that Russian speakers were measurably faster at telling the difference between two shades of blue if those shades happened to fall across the Sini-Goluboy boundary, compared to discriminating between two shades that were equally different in wavelength but fell within the same Russian category. English speakers showed no such speed advantage at that specific boundary.
Whoa! So they literally perceive the difference more quickly because their language has given them separate labels? That's the categorical perception thing?
That's it precisely. Having a linguistic boundary seems to enhance your perceptual sensitivity at that boundary. Your language primes you, makes you quicker to notice and respond to distinctions that are encoded in your vocabulary. It sharpens your perception in very specific language-relevant ways.
That is a powerful demonstration. Vocabulary isn't just for talking. It genuinely shapes how quickly or easily we perceive the physical world. Amazing. What's another really compelling example of this?
Well, one that really highlights the connection between language, environment, and cognition is the Gugu Yimithirr language.
Gugu Yimithirr.
Yeah.
Spoken by an Aboriginal community in Australia, right? What's unique about their language?
What's fascinating is their system for talking about space and direction. Unlike English, which relies heavily on egocentric directions, relative terms like left, right, and front, me, behind you.
Things relative to our own bodies.
Yes. Gugu Yimithirr speakers use cardinal directions north, south, east, west almost exclusively, even for small-scale space.
So instead of saying the cup is to your right, they'd have to say something like the cup is northeast of you.
Essentially, yes, or the ant is crawling south on your leg. And this isn't just for navigating large landscapes. It applies to everyday conversation about objects right there in a room, or even on your own body. You wouldn't say, move your chair a bit to the left.
You'd say, move your chair a bit to the west.
Correct. Assuming that's the correct cardinal direction at that moment.
Good grief. That requires you to know where north, south, east, and west are constantly, every single moment.
It absolutely does. This linguistic structure imposes a constant cognitive demand to maintain absolute spatial orientation. You have to know your cardinal directions wherever you are, indoors or outdoors.
That sounds exhausting. But does it? Does it make them better at navigating?
Phenomenally better, according to research by anthropologist Stephen Levinson, who worked extensively with Gugu Yimithirr speakers. His studies showed they possess extraordinary spatial reasoning and navigational abilities.
Just because their language forces them to think that way.
They are significantly better at tasks like dead reckoning, knowing your position and navigating without landmarks or maps, relying purely on an internal sense of direction and distance traveled, compared to speakers of languages like English that rely on relative egocentric directions.
So it's not just a separate skill they learn. The language itself trains this ability.
It seems deeply integrated. The linguistic necessity of constant cardinal orientation appears to profoundly enhance their spatial cognition in a way that our egocentric language doesn't require or foster to nearly the same degree. Their vocabulary and grammar for space fundamentally alter their moment-to-moment spatial awareness and long-range navigation skills.
That is genuinely mind-blowing. The words you use for space literally make you better at moving through space. Okay, so we've seen individual words, lexical categories matter. What about the grammar, the rules for putting words together? How does that shape thinking?
Grammar, the structural rules of language, influences how we process and organize information in ways that are often more subtle and sometimes mandatory. Grammar dictates what information we must include or pay attention to when we construct a sentence.
How does that work? Can you give an example of grammar nudging thought?
A frequently cited example is grammatical gender, like in German or Spanish. Every noun in German is assigned one of three genders: masculine der, feminine, die, or neuter das.
And these genders are often arbitrary, right? Like a key isn't inherently male or a bridge inherently female.
Exactly. Der Schlüssel, the key, is masculine.
Yeah.
Die Brücke, the bridge, is feminine. It's a purely linguistic feature, not based on the object's actual properties.
Okay, so it's a grammatical requirement. Does it do anything to how people think about keys or bridges?
Well, that's what researchers like Boroditsky investigated. They asked German speakers and Spanish speakers where the word for bridge, el puente, is masculine to describe various objects, including a bridge.
Using adjectives.
Yes, and they found a consistent difference related to the grammatical gender in each language.
Yeah.
German speakers, whose word for bridge, die Brücke, is feminine, tended to use adjectives often associated with femininity to describe it.
Like?
Words like beautiful, elegant, delicate, slender, fragile.
And the Spanish speakers, with their masculine, el puente,
They were significantly more likely to use adjectives typically associated with masculinity, like strong, sturdy, big, tall, long, dangerous.
For the same kind of object, just described in a different language with a different grammatical gender.
Precisely. So the seemingly arbitrary linguistic gender assigned to a noun in your language appears to subtly bias the way you conceptualize the inherent qualities or characteristics of that object.
It's not conscious, but the constant linguistic pairing somehow colors perception.
That's the interpretation, yes. It's a fascinating glimpse into how an abstract grammatical feature can have tangible cognitive correlates, subtly shaping our associations.
That is remarkable. Your language's grammar isn't just about putting sentences together correctly. It can add this layer of almost personality or conceptual nuance to every single noun you use. What's another grammatical feature that has this kind of impact?
Another really interesting one is evidentiality. This is a grammatical feature found in languages like Turkish, among others.
Evidentiality, what does that mean?
It means the grammar requires you to specify the source of your knowledge when you make a statement, particularly about past events. In English, you can just say, he left the party.
Right, you don't have to say how you know that.
You could add, I saw him leave, or apparently he left, or Sarah told me he left, but those are optional additions. They aren't built into the verb structure itself.
Okay, so how is Turkish different?
In Turkish, the verb ending itself often must indicate how you acquired the information. There are different grammatical markers, different suffixes on the verb, depending on whether you witnessed the event directly, whether you inferred it from evidence, like his coat is gone, whether you heard it reported by someone else, or whether it's general knowledge.
So just saying the equivalent of he left in Turkish would automatically tell the listener how you know he left just by the form of the verb.
In many contexts, yes. The grammar forces you to encode the source of your evidence.
Wow. And how might that shape cognition? What's the implication?
Well, the argument is that this constant grammatical requirement might lead Turkish speakers to develop different cognitive habits or priorities concerning information sourcing, reliability, and evidence compared to English speakers for whom specifying the source is optional.
They're constantly, perhaps subconsciously, evaluating the basis for their statements because their language demands it.
That's the idea. It could foster a heightened sensitivity to evidence and how knowledge is acquired. This is sometimes called grammaticalized cognition, where a particular cognitive process seems to be woven into the very fabric of the language's grammar, making it almost obligatory.
That's a powerful concept, grammar forcing you into a specific cognitive routine, like constantly checking your sources. It really makes you wonder what subtle processes our own English grammar might be imposing on us without us even realizing it.
It certainly does. It opens up a whole field of inquiry. And beyond these specific rules and words, language is also, of course, deeply intertwined with culture. It acts as a kind of cultural lens.
Right. The materials talked about language as a cultural lens. How does that work?
Language serves as a massive repository, a storehouse of a culture's shared values, beliefs, history, and ways of seeing the world. These aren't just in dictionaries. They're embedded in idioms, proverbs, metaphors, the connotations of words, and the very concepts the language makes easy or hard to express.
And these linguistic features don't just reflect the culture.
They also actively shape thought by reinforcing those cultural priorities and perspectives every time they're used. They make certain ways of thinking feel more natural or obvious within that cultural context.
The English idiom, time is money, seems like a perfect example of this.
It's a classic one, absolutely. This phrase, so common in many English-speaking cultures, really embodies a particular cultural emphasis on efficiency, productivity, and viewing time as a quantifiable, valuable resource that needs to be managed, saved, spent wisely.
And using that phrase, hearing it often, it reinforces that way of thinking about time.
It can subtly influence speakers to prioritize tasks, schedule their lives, and even judge others' use of time based on this underlying metaphor of time as a commodity.
And if you contrast that with a different cultural perspective, the materials mention the Spanish word mañana.
Yes, mañana. Literally, tomorrow is often associated, sometimes stereotypically, with a more relaxed approach to time, less urgency than implied by time is money.
But we need to be careful with that, right? Not oversimplify.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely crucial to approach this with nuance. Languages and cultures are incredibly complex. Associating an entire cultural attitude with a single word risks falling into harmful stereotypes. Not every Spanish speaker is laid back about deadlines.
Okay.
But the linguistic association itself, the cultural discourse around the word, might reflect a different historical or contextual emphasis regarding time management within certain Spanish-speaking cultures, even if it doesn't define every individual. It points to a different cultural conversation about time.
Got it. It's about understanding how these linguistic touchstones can signal cultural values or tendencies without using them to paint everyone with the same brush.
Precisely. Another really strong cultural example, which connects back to vocabulary, is the richness of words related to snow in Inuit languages.
Ah, yes, the many words for snow idea.
Right. Now, the exact number is often exaggerated in popular accounts, and it's a complex linguistic debate about what counts as a word. But setting aside the specific number, there's no question that these languages possess a much richer, more differentiated vocabulary for various types and conditions of snow and ice than, say, English typically does.
And that lexical richness isn't just for show, it's directly tied to their environment and survival, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. This extensive vocabulary allows speakers to make very fine, crucial distinctions between snow that's good for building igloos, snow that's dangerous to travel on, falling snow, drifting snow, slushy snow, hard-packed snow.
Distinctions that could be life or death in the Arctic.
Exactly. The language focuses the speaker's attention on these environmental nuances, reinforcing essential cultural knowledge and adaptive behaviors necessary for survival. It's a clear case where the language has evolved hand in hand with cultural needs and, in turn, shapes the perception of the environment to highlight what's culturally vital.
The language trains you to see the world in the way your culture needs you to see it.
And think about languages with fundamentally different structures for word formation, like Arabic. Arabic uses a root-based morphology,
where many words are built from a common three-letter root.
Yes. For example, the root KTB is related to writing. From this root, you get kataba, he wrote, kitab, book, maktab, office or desk, katib, writer, and so on. The underlying root links all these concepts semantically.
Even though in English, write, book, and office seem like quite separate words.
Right. It's been argued by some scholars that this linguistic structure, which inherently highlights the interconnectedness of concepts derived from a common source, might reflect or even foster a cultural emphasis on holistic thinking, seeing the relationships and underlying unity between different ideas or domains.
So even the way words themselves are constructed could embody a cultural value like interconnectedness. Language really is like a deep cultural map etched into our minds.
It truly seems to be. And this cultural lens, embedded in language, also significantly shapes how we express and perhaps even how we experience our emotions.
This is where we get into those fascinating, untranslatable emotion words.
Exactly. Language provides the labels we use to identify, categorize, and communicate our internal feeling states. And some languages have evolved specific words for complex emotional experiences that lack a neat, single-word equivalent in other languages.
Like the German word Schadenfreude, a classic example.
Yes, that specific feeling of pleasure derived from witnessing someone else's misfortune. English speakers definitely understand the concept. We might even feel it, but we don't have one single common word that precisely captures it. We have to use a phrase.
Right. Or mono no aware from Japanese.
A beautiful term. It refers to a kind of poignant appreciation of the transient nature of things, a gentle sadness or bittersweet awareness of life's impermanence and fleeting beauty. It's a complex blend. Beauty, empathy, sadness, acceptance. Very hard to capture concisely in English.
And saudade in Portuguese?
Saudade. A deep, often melancholic longing or nostalgia for something or someone absent, maybe something that can never be recovered. It carries connotations of love, loss, distance, and yearning all wrapped together.
And what about the Danish concept of hygge? That one's become quite well known recently.
Hygge, yes. That feeling of cozy contentment, warmth, conviviality, enjoying simple, comfortable moments, often with loved ones, in a secure and pleasant atmosphere. It's more than just coziness, it's a cultural emphasis on actively creating and valuing that specific feeling state.
So the very existence of these specific words, does it suggest that speakers of those languages experience those feelings more often, or maybe more distinctly?
That's one plausible interpretation. Having a specific label might make that particular emotional configuration more salient, more recognizable, easier to identify, and perhaps even cultivate within that culture. It ties into research by psychologists like Lisa Feldman Barrett on emotional granularity.
Emotional granularity, what's that?
It refers to the ability to differentiate between emotional states with a high degree of specificity. Her research suggests that individuals who have a richer, more nuanced vocabulary for emotions, who can use more specific words beyond just basic ones like happy, sad, angry, are actually better at distinguishing subtle variations in their own feelings.
Does that have benefits?
Yes, this enhanced ability to label emotions accurately seems to be correlated with better emotional regulation, coping skills, and overall psychological well-being.
That's quite something. So having a more precise emotional vocabulary, provided partly by your language, could literally change your subjective experience of your feelings and how well you manage them.
The evidence points in that direction. It suggests that language provides crucial cognitive tools for parsing our internal emotional landscape more finely. And those untranslatable terms like HIG, they don't just name a feeling, they often reflect culturally valued emotional states or practices. HIG embodies a cultural encouragement to seek and cherish comfort, connection, and simple pleasures.
So language gives us the words for feelings, and those words can reflect and maybe even reinforce the cultural importance or framing of those feelings. It's definitely a two-way street.
It seems to be.
And this complex interplay between language, culture, and thought also extends to how we approach problems, doesn't it? Our reasoning styles.
It does seem to. The underlying structural patterns of language might predispose its speakers towards different cognitive styles when they engage in problem solving and reasoning.
How could the structure of a sentence influence something like how you solve a problem?
Well, let's consider languages like Chinese again. As we mentioned, they often rely heavily on context and frequently allow subjects of sentences to be omitted if they're clearly understood for the situation. This kind of flexible, context-dependent structure is sometimes linked to a preference for what researchers call holistic thinking.
Okay, what defines holistic thinking?
It's a cognitive style that tends to emphasize seeing the bigger picture, noticing patterns, relationships, and interdependencies between elements within a field. It's about focusing on the context in which things occur, rather than just isolating individual objects or actors.
Seeing the whole system, maybe?
That's a good way to think about it. Now compare that with English. English typically has a more rigid subject-verb-object structure. The dog subject, chased verb, the ball object.
We usually need that subject explicitly stated.
Generally, yes. And this structure is often associated with what's called analytical thinking. This style tends to focus more on individual agents performing actions on objects, breaking things down into discrete components, and emphasizing linear cause and effect relationships.
So one linguistic structure might subtly encourage seeing the forest, while the other encourages focusing more on the individual trees.
That's a pretty good analogy, yes. Research by cognitive scientists like Richard Nisbett has explored these kinds of differences quite extensively. His work suggests that individuals from East Asian linguistic backgrounds often demonstrate a preference for holistic reasoning styles.
How did they test that?
Through various tasks. For example, they might be quicker to notice relationships between objects in a complex visual scene, or pay more attention to situational factors when explaining social behavior. Western language speakers, including English speakers, tend to show, on average, a stronger inclination towards analytical reasoning, isolating objects from their background, categorizing them based on rules, and focusing on individual attributes.
Is there a simple illustration of this difference in perspective, like how someone might describe a scene?
Yes, imagine describing a picture of a fish swimming in a pond. A typical English speaker might focus on the main actor, the fish is swimming, or maybe a large fish swims quickly. The focus is on the subject and its action or attributes.
Okay, and a Chinese speaker?
A Chinese speaker might be somewhat more likely to frame it in terms of the context or relationship. Perhaps saying something closer to, there are fish in the pond, or inside the pond, fish swim. The description might start with the environment or emphasize the relationship between the fish and the pond.
That's subtle, but it does point towards a potentially different cognitive starting point, doesn't it? What you choose to mention first or emphasize.
Exactly. It's a subtle linguistic framing difference that might reflect a deeper difference in cognitive priorities, foregrounding the object versus foregrounding the context.
And how might these different styles, holistic versus analytical, influence something like decision-making?
Well, a more holistic thinker might be inclined to weigh systemic factors, potential ripple effects, and the broader context more heavily when making a decision. An analytical thinker might focus more sharply on the individual components, the primary agent involved, and the most direct cause and effect outcomes.
Neither approach is necessarily better or worse overall, right? They just represent different pathways.
Precisely. They're different cognitive strategies, potentially nudged or made more habitual by the patterns ingrained in one's language. It really makes you reflect on how the very syntax we use every day might be subtly steering our fundamental approach to understanding situations and figuring things out.
Absolutely. Now, for many people listening, this isn't just theoretical speculation about other languages. They might speak 2 or 3 or more languages themselves.
Yes, and multilingualism adds a whole other fascinating dimension to this entire discussion. Being bilingual or multilingual isn't just about knowing more words. It has demonstrable effects on cognition.
What kind of effects are we talking about?
Research consistently shows that bilingualism significantly enhances what are called executive functions. These are the high-level cognitive processes housed primarily in the prefrontal cortex that control and manage other cognitive abilities. They're like the brain's air traffic control system.
Okay, so managing multiple languages strengthens this control system. What specific improvements do we see?
Enhanced executive functions can lead to measurable improvements in several areas. Things like multitasking, juggling multiple streams of information or tasks simultaneously. Task switching, being able to flexibly shift attention between different activities or rule sets. Inhibitory control, the crucial ability to suppress irrelevant information or automatic responses. And cognitive flexibility in general, adapting to new situations, rules, or perspectives more easily.
So the constant mental gymnastics of selecting one language, inhibiting the other, switching back and forth, it actually trains these core cognitive skills.
That's the leading hypothesis, yes. It provides ongoing, demanding cognitive exercise for these executive control networks. And beyond that, some studies also link bilingualism to increased creativity and better perspective-taking abilities.
That makes sense. Constantly navigating different linguistic viewpoints might make you better at seeing things from different angles.
It seems plausible. Furthermore, research by Ellen Bialystock, who's a major figure in this field, has provided compelling evidence that bilingualism contributes to what's called cognitive reserve.
Cognitive reserve, what does that mean exactly?
Think of it like building up extra capacity or resilience in your brain's cognitive networks. It's like having more neural pathways or more efficient processing available. Studies suggest that this increased reserve in lifelong bilingual individuals may act as a buffer against the effects of brain aging.
A buffer. How so?
It might help the brain cope better with age-related changes or even neuropathology. The evidence suggests that bilingualism may delay the onset of clinical symptoms of dementia or other age-related cognitive conditions, even if the underlying brain changes are occurring.
Wow. That is a genuinely significant potential long-term health benefit, delaying cognitive decline.
It's a major finding, yes. The constant management of 2 languages seems to build this resilience. Think about switching between, say, English and Spanish. It requires you to constantly activate the relevant grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and even the associated cultural communication styles while simultaneously suppressing those of the other language.
That sounds like a constant mental workout.
It is, and this constant negotiation appears to build robust cognitive flexibility and strengthen those executive control networks over the long term.
And beyond the cognitive mechanics, multilingualism also gives you access to different ways of seeing the world, right? It's not just about brain training.
Absolutely crucial point. Each language, as we've discussed, carries within it a unique set of conceptual categories, cultural assumptions, embedded metaphors, and ways of framing reality. A bilingual or multilingual person has access to multiple such systems.
They can potentially think in different ways, depending on the language.
They might find that one language offers a better tool for a specific task. For example, they might leverage the expressive nuances or emotional vocabulary of Spanish for personal interactions, while finding English's structure more suited for precise, technical writing. It provides a richer, more flexible palette for both thought and communication.
It's like having access to multiple cognitive toolkits, and you can pick the best one for the current job or situation.
That's a great analogy. And this very experience of navigating multiple linguistic systems often fosters something called heightened metalinguistic awareness.
Metalinguistic awareness.
It's the ability to consciously reflect on language itself, how it works, its structure, its rules, and critically, how it might be shaping your own thought processes and the thoughts of others. Having direct experience with different ways languages carve up the world makes you more attuned to the fact that language isn't just a transparent window onto reality.
It's a lens, or maybe multiple lenses.
Exactly. So being multilingual can make you inherently more aware of the very topic we're discussing today. It provides a kind of insider perspective on linguistic relativity.
That's a really powerful connection. Multilingualism doesn't just change your brain. It can change your awareness of how language works on your brain.
It certainly seems to. And understanding all these complex interactions, vocabulary, grammar, culture, emotion, cognition, multilingualism, it isn't just academic. It has real practical applications for you, the listener, in your daily life, whether you speak one language or many.
Okay, so how can we apply this knowledge? What are the practical takeaways?
Well, the material points to several key areas. First, in academic or learning contexts. Understanding linguistic influence is really valuable for critical reading and text analysis.
How so?
If you recognize that, say, an article about a global issue written in English might frame that issue through a lens shaped by English linguistic habits or Western cultural assumptions, you can read it more critically. You can ask yourself, what perspectives might be missing? How might this be described differently in another language or cultural context?
So being aware of concepts like linguistic hegemony, the idea that dominant languages can shape global discourse, or noticing potential cultural biases hidden in the phrasing or vocabulary helps you become a more discerning reader and thinker.
Absolutely. It allows you to analyze text not just for what they say, but for how language is being used to shape the message, the perspective, perhaps even the perceived objectivity.
That's useful. What about in the workplace?
In professional communication, especially in today's increasingly multicultural workplaces, this awareness is crucial. It fosters better collaboration and helps avoid misunderstandings that arise from linguistic and cultural differences.
Right. Thinking consciously about intercultural competence and trying to achieve semantic alignment, making sure everyone understands concepts in the same way, despite different linguistic backgrounds, becomes much more important. Even just writing an email.
Exactly. It encourages you to pause and consider, could the way I'm phrasing this report or the way my colleague from another background is interpreting my instructions be influenced by our different linguistic habits or assumptions? This sensitivity can vastly improve teamwork, negotiations, and overall communication effectiveness.
Makes sense. And what about on a more personal level, just for understanding ourselves better?
On a personal level, reflecting on how your own native language or the languages you speak might be shaping your worldview is a powerful path towards greater self-awareness and also greater empathy for others.
How does that work?
By considering your own cognitive perspective, the potential biases, habits, or default ways of thinking nudged by your language, you can gain a deeper understanding of why you perceive things the way you do. And recognizing that others operate with different linguistic lenses fosters cultural sensitivity and makes you less likely to assume your way of seeing things is the only way or the universally correct way.
It's about understanding the filter or filters through which you experience the world and appreciating that others have different filters based on their languages and cultures.
Precisely. And that recognition is absolutely fundamental to navigating our interconnected, diverse world effectively and respectfully.
Okay, so the evidence for language influencing thought linguistic relativity seems pretty strong and has these practical implications. But you mentioned earlier it's still debated.
Yes, it's important to acknowledge that this is a dynamic field with ongoing debates and challenges. The idea that language shapes thought isn't universally accepted without qualification, and it faces some important criticisms.
What are the main counter-arguments?
One major line of criticism comes from those who emphasize cognitive universalism. They argue that while language clearly influences how we express or categorize our thoughts, it doesn't fundamentally alter the underlying cognitive processes themselves.
So they believe basic thinking machinery is the same for everyone.
Essentially, yes. They point to evidence suggesting that core cognitive abilities, like basic perception, memory capacity, logical reasoning, the ability to understand causality, appear to function similarly across all human populations, regardless of the specific language they speak.
So in this view, language is more like software running on universal hardware. It organizes and communicates thoughts, but doesn't change the hardware's basic capability.
That's one way to frame that argument. The Gugu Yimithir example often comes up in this context too.
How so?
Critics might say, yes, their language forces them to constantly track cardinal directions, which enhances that specific spatial skill. But they argue, all humans possess the underlying capacity for spatial reasoning and orientation. The Gugu Yimithir language simply requires them to train and apply that universal capacity in a particular highly developed way rather than fundamentally altering the capacity itself.
So it's practice driven by language rather than a fundamental change in cognition.
That's the counterargument. It highlights the real complexity of disentangling what's truly universal in human cognition versus what's specifically shaped or tuned by language. It's about balancing cognitive universalism with linguistic specificity. Evaluating the research requires careful attention to empirical validation. How strong is the evidence and how is it being interpreted?
That makes sense. It's rarely black and white. What other challenges or controversies exist in this area?
A really crucial one is the ethical concern about linguistic stereotyping. This is extremely important to avoid.
How does stereotyping come into play?
It's the danger of taking findings about group tendencies that might be linked to language, like the German-Spanish gendered descriptions of bridges or the associations with mañana, and misapplying them to make broad, simplistic, and often negative assumptions about all individual speakers of that language.
Right, like assuming every German speaker personifies bridges, or every Spanish speaker is relaxed about time.
Exactly. Or assuming everyone who speaks a language associated with holistic thinking always thinks holistically in every situation. That's a harmful oversimplification. We have to be incredibly careful to debunk such myths and consciously avoid cultural oversimplification or stereotypical bias.
So the research might show subtle average differences or tendencies, but that doesn't define any single individual.
Absolutely not. While language reflects and reinforces certain cultural tendencies, individuals within any culture are diverse. Their thinking is shaped by countless factors: education, personality, personal experiences, socioeconomic status, far beyond just their native language. The research points to potential influences and tendencies at a group level, not rigid deterministic rules about how any given individual thinks or behaves.
That's a vital distinction to maintain. Engage with the ideas responsibly. Avoid essentializing entire groups.
Precisely. It requires nuanced arguments and critical thinking about the limitations of the research as well as its findings.
Okay, so looking ahead then, this relationship between language and thought, it's clearly complex and still being explored. How might it continue to evolve, especially in our rapidly changing world?
That is a huge and fascinating question. Globalization and technology are fundamentally reshaping communication on a global scale. This is almost certainly going to impact the language-thought relationship in ways we're probably only just beginning to grasp.
Like the rise of artificial intelligence generating language.
Exactly. Think about it. AI language models are producing vast amounts of text, dialogue, code, creative content that we interact with constantly. We need to start asking, how might the patterns, the structures, the vocabulary, the stylistic norms embedded in machine-generated language subtly influence human cognition over time?
Could we start thinking more like the algorithms, or adopting their linguistic habits?
It's a serious question. Are we adapting our own thinking and language use to be more easily processed or understood by AI systems? Or are the biases inherent in the data used to train AI models subtly shaping our own conceptualizations? It's a completely new frontier in the language thought discussion.
That's a profound thought, being influenced by linguistic input that didn't even originate from a human mind or culture in the traditional sense.
And consider social media platforms. Platforms like X, TikTok, Instagram. They expose users to an absolutely unprecedented diversity of linguistic styles.
Yeah, dialects, slang, memes, abbreviations, code switching.
All mashed together, often from different cultures and languages, presented in rapid-fire succession. This constant exposure and the need to navigate these hybrid linguistic landscapes could be fostering new forms of cognitive adaptation.
Maybe making us more flexible at processing linguistic variation, or faster at picking up new terms.
Potentially. Constantly deciphering novel jargon, understanding cross-cultural references, communicating effectively in these fast-paced digital spaces, it might be training our brains in new ways, perhaps enhancing certain aspects of cognitive flexibility, or maybe shortening attention spans for more traditional forms of language. It's hard to say yet.
But it definitely positions us, you, the listener, right at the forefront of this ongoing evolution. We're living through a period where digital linguistics and globalized communication are actively reshaping the landscape.
The relationship between language and thought isn't static. It's constantly being renegotiated in response to these massive technological and social shifts.
It's clear this is a field that's incredibly dynamic, far from settled, and touches on so many different disciplines.
It really is. Linguistics, psychology, neuroscience, anthropology, computer science, philosophy, they all have a stake in understanding this relationship.
So, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the single most important takeaway message you hope listeners will carry with them from our discussion?
I think the core idea is that language is so much more than just a passive tool for labeling thoughts that already exist fully formed in our heads. It's an active, dynamic force. It profoundly shapes how we carve up reality into categories, how we structure our perceptions, how we process information, how we conceptualize and express emotions, and even how we approach solving problems.
It's a partner in the thinking process itself.
A fundamental partner. And exploring this relationship, digging into these ideas, isn't just an interesting academic exercise.
Right, it has real value.
For you, the listener, engaging with these concepts, thinking about linguistic relativity, how vocabulary like color terms or spatial language works, how grammar like gender or evidentiality might subtly guide thought, how culture is baked into language, it's genuinely a powerful path.
How so?
It deepens your linguistic mastery, whether you're learning a new language or understanding your own better, by highlighting these deeper nuances. It enhances cultural competence by revealing some of the hidden assumptions and perspectives embedded within different languages. And it fosters intellectual growth by challenging your basic assumptions about thought, reality, and the human mind.
So, by grappling with how language shapes thinking, you gain not just a deeper appreciation for language itself, but maybe a deeper understanding of the sheer diversity of human experience and how different people construct their realities differently.
Beautifully put. It empowers you to navigate our complex, interconnected, and increasingly technologically mediated world with greater insight, more flexibility, and hopefully more empathy.
Which leaves us with a final, really compelling question to ponder, doesn't it? A provocative thought for everyone listening.
Go for it.
Given this constant, maybe even accelerating evolution of language driven by technology, globalization, AI, social media, all the things we've touched on, how might the very way we think, our collective cognition, continue to transform in the coming years and decades? And what does that ongoing transformation mean for our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of each other across linguistic and cultural divides?
That's the big question to keep chewing on. How is our thinking changing right now, and where is it headed?
Something definitely to keep thinking about long after this deep dive ends. Thank you so much for unpacking all of that with us today.
My pleasure. It's endlessly fascinating.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something, well, pretty fundamental. How does language, the tool we use constantly, actually shape how we think, how we perceive reality?
It's a huge question, isn't it? We swim in language all day, but we rarely stop to think about its deeper effects on our own minds.
Right. And it's not just about putting words together. It feels like it goes deeper, affecting our whole internal landscape, our cognition.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, our mission is to sort of unpack that intricate link between language and thought. We'll look at some fascinating research.
Yeah, the goal is to help you understand not just that language affects thought, I think most people kind of feel that instinctively, but really how it works and, crucially, why it even matters.
And you might find some surprising connections, things that could actually change how you approach information, maybe even communication itself.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the foundational idea here?
Well, the classic starting point is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It's named after two linguists, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. They were pioneers in suggesting that language might actively shape how we perceive and think about the world.
Ah, yes, Sapir-Whorf. So the idea isn't just that language reflects thought, but that it could actually be, like, constructing it, or at least guiding it.
Precisely. And they had, well, there are basically two versions people talk about, a strong one and a weaker one.
Okay, let's break that down. What's the strong version?
The strong version is called linguistic determinism.
Mm.
And it's pretty radical. It suggested that language entirely determines thought. Like the limits of your language are the absolute limits of your world.
Whoa. So if your language didn't have a word for, say, internet, you literally couldn't conceive of it. That sounds incredibly restrictive.
It does, doesn't it? And that's why, well, that strong version isn't really accepted by most researchers today. We see evidence that humans can think beyond their immediate linguistic toolkit. We invent new words, we grasp new concepts. Thought isn't quite that rigidly imprisoned.
Okay, so linguistic determinism is maybe more of a historical bookmark. The real focus now, where the modern research finds traction, is the weaker version.
Exactly. That's linguistic relativity. It's a more nuanced idea. It suggests language doesn't rigidly determine thought, but it definitely influences it. It guides our attention. It biases our perception. It makes certain ways of thinking feel more natural or habitual.
Okay. So it nudges our thinking, it shapes it, directs it, but doesn't trap it. That feels much more plausible.
Yes, it's about tendencies and influences rather than absolute constraints.
Right. So let's explore that influence. How does this linguistic relativity actually play out? Maybe starting with something abstract, like how we perceive time.
Good place to start. Worf himself used time as a key example. He contrasted English and other languages like it with the Hopi language.
Okay.
In English, we lean heavily on tense markers, past, present, future. We talk about time like it's a line we move along, or even like a resource we can save or spend.
Yeah. Waste time, invest time. It's treated like a commodity.
Exactly. Worf argued that Hopi grammar didn't segment time quite like that. It focused more on duration, on whether something is ongoing or cyclical, more aligned perhaps with natural cycles. He thought this might lead Hopi speakers to feel or conceptualize time differently, less like a line, maybe more like a continuous unfolding.
That's a really interesting idea. Now, I know Horf's specific claims about Hopi have been debated quite a bit over the years.
They have, definitely. His methodology and interpretations faced criticism, but the core idea that the structure of your language can bias how you think about abstract concepts like time, that idea has actually found support in more recent controlled research.
Okay, so what does that modern research show?
Well, work by researchers like Lara Boroditsky provides some really compelling experimental evidence, often looking at spatial metaphors for time.
Right, like in English, we usually talk about time horizontally. We look forward to things. We put the past behind us.
Exactly. Our primary metaphor maps time onto a horizontal axis. But compare that to Mandarin Chinese. Mandarin speakers use horizontal metaphors too, but they also commonly use vertical ones. For example, the word for up, shang, can refer to the previous week, and the word for down, exia, can refer to the next week.
Wait, hang on. Past is up and future is down. That's completely flipped from how I'd instinctively map it, which would probably future up, past down, if I had to go vertical.
It's different, isn't it? And Boroditsky ran experiments looking at this. She found that Mandarin speakers were actually faster at confirming facts about time, like whether March comes before April, if the visual prompt they saw was arranged vertically.
Wow.
Whereas English speakers were faster if the prompt was arranged horizontally, matching our dominant metaphor.
So it's not just the words they use, it actually affects their cognitive processing speed depending on the spatial layout.
That's what the evidence suggests. The habitual way your language frames time spatially seems to subtly tune your cognitive system, making it more efficient to process time-related information when it's presented in that linguistically familiar spatial arrangement.
That's incredible. A measurable cognitive effect just from the metaphors embedded in language. It really shows that relativity part.
It really does. And this idea extends beyond metaphors into the basic building blocks, the vocabulary itself. The specific words a language has act as tools for carving up reality, for categorizing things.
Right, like how different languages categorize colors. We all see the same spectrum physically, but the words we use draw the lines in different places.
Exactly, the classic example. Take the color blue. In English, we basically have one main word, blue, and then we add modifiers like light blue, dark blue, navy blue.
Sure.
But in Russian, there are two distinct, common, basic terms. Sininy for darker blues, and goluboy for lighter blues. They're treated as fundamentally different categories, almost like how we treat red and pink.
Okay, so two separate words. Did that actually change how Russian speakers see blue?
Well, not exactly see, but perceive or discriminate. Studies found that Russian speakers were measurably faster at telling the difference between two shades of blue if those shades happen to fall across that sinigoloboy boundary.
Faster than English speakers doing the same task.
Yes, and faster than distinguishing two blue shades that both fell within the same Russian category, sininy or goluboy. Having that specific linguistic boundary seemed to heighten their perceptual sensitivity right at that dividing line.
Wow. So the vocabulary itself is priming them, making them quicker to notice a distinction that their language emphasizes. That's fundamental.
It really is. It suggests vocabulary isn't just labeling things we already perceive. It can actually sharpen or tune our perception of the physical world.
Okay, that's color. What about something like space and direction?
Another fascinating area. Consider the Gugu Yamathura language from an Aboriginal community in Australia.
Ah, I think I've heard about this one. They use cardinal directions for everything, right?
Almost exclusively. North, south, east, west. Not just for navigating landscapes, but for describing things on a small scale too. Instead of saying the cup is to your left, they'd say something like the cup is northeast of your foot.
Good grief. That means you'd constantly have to know which way is north, even indoors, just to talk about everyday objects. That sounds incredibly demanding cognitively.
It is. It requires a constant automatic sense of absolute orientation. And research by Stephen Levinson and others showed that speakers of Gugu Yimithir have extraordinary spatial reasoning and navigation skills, like near-perfect dead reckoning.
Because their language forces them to.
Essentially, yes. The linguistic necessity of constantly tracking cardinal directions seems to train and profoundly enhance their spatial cognition in a way that languages like English, which rely on relative terms, left, right, front, back, simply don't require.
So the language itself is like a built-in cognitive training program for spatial awareness. Amazing.
It really illustrates how deeply embedded linguistic structures can shape specific cognitive abilities. And it's not just vocabulary. Grammar plays a huge role, too.
Okay, how does grammar subtly nudge our thinking?
Grammatical gender is a great example. Many languages, like German, Spanish, French, assign a gender masculine or feminine, sometimes neutered to nouns, even inanimate objects.
Right, like bridge. It's not inherently male or female, but the language assigns it one. Is there any evidence this purely grammatical feature affects how people think about the actual object?
There is. Broditsky did work on this, too. She found that if you take an object like a bridge, which is feminine in German, die Brücke, but masculine in Spanish, el puente, and ask German and Spanish speakers to describe it.
They describe it differently.
Yes. German speakers tended to use adjectives often associated with femininity in Western cultures, words like beautiful, elegant, slender. Spanish speakers, describing the same kind of object, tended to use adjectives more associated with masculinity, strong, long, sturdy.
Wow. So this arbitrary grammatical tag, assigned by the language, subtly leaks into how people conceptualize the object's inherent qualities. That's quite something.
It's a really neat demonstration of how even seemingly abstract grammatical rules can shape our associations and maybe even our mental imagery.
Okay, what's another example of grammar's influence?
Evidentiality is a fascinating one. Some languages, like Turkish, have grammar that requires speakers to specify how they know something, the source of their information, especially when talking about past events.
Evidentiality. So, like marking if you saw it yourself versus just heard about it.
Exactly. In English, we can add phrases like, I saw, I heard, apparently, but it's usually optional. We can just say, he went to the store.
Right.
In Turkish, often the verb ending itself has to encode that information. Did you witness it directly? Did you infer it from evidence? Did someone tell you? Is it common knowledge?
So you can't just state a fact without implicitly tagging its source in the grammar itself.
Often, yes. And the implication is that this constant grammatical requirement might cultivate different cognitive habits around evidence, sourcing, and reliability. It could foster a kind of heightened sensitivity to where information comes from. Some call it dramatized cognition.
Like a built-in, how do you know that?
Yeah.
Check, running constantly in the background because the grammar demands it. That's powerful.
It really makes you think about what our own grammar might be subtly forcing us to pay attention to or perhaps ignore.
Absolutely. And beyond these specific rules, language also acts as a kind of cultural lens, doesn't it? Encoding values and history.
Definitely. Language is a massive repository of cultural knowledge, values, and ways of seeing the world. Think about idioms and metaphors.
The classic one in English is time is money.
Perfect example. That little phrase encapsulates a whole cultural orientation toward efficiency, productivity, seeing time as this quantifiable, valuable resource that shouldn't be wasted. Using it reinforces that mindset.
And you compare that to, say, the connotations around the Spanish word mañana.
Right. But we have to be super careful not to stereotype here. Mañana literally means tomorrow or morning. It's sometimes culturally associated with a more relaxed, less rigidly scheduled approach to time. It points to different cultural conversations and priorities around time, even if it doesn't dictate individual behavior.
Got it. So it reflects a cultural tendency, a way of talking about time without being deterministic for every person.
Exactly. It's about the cultural echoes within the language. And this links back to vocabulary adapting to the environment too, like the Inuit languages and snow.
Right, the idea that they have many, many words for snow.
Yes, and while the exact number often gets wildly exaggerated in pop culture, it's true that languages spoken in Arctic environments have a much richer, more differentiated vocabulary for different types and conditions of snow and ice than, say, English does.
Because those distinctions are crucial for survival, right? Like knowing which snow is safe to walk on, which is good for building.
Precisely. The vocabulary is highly adapted to their environment and needs. It focuses attention on crucial environmental details. encoding and reinforcing vital cultural knowledge for navigating that world. The language itself is an adaptive tool.
It literally trains you to see the distinctions that matter in your specific context.
That's a great way to put it. And even the basic structure, the morphology of a language, can potentially reflect or foster certain ways of thinking. Consider Arabic.
How so?
Arabic uses a root system, where many words are derived from a common three-letter root. So the root KTB relates to writing, and from it you get kataba, he wrote, kitab, book, maktab, office or desk, katib, writer, and so on.
Okay, so you can clearly see the conceptual connection between related words built right into their form.
Exactly. And some scholars argue that this structure, by inherently highlighting the interconnectedness of concepts that share a root, might reflect or even subtly encourage a more holistic way of thinking, seeing the relationships and underlying unity between different ideas.
Interesting. So the very way words are built could nudge towards certain cognitive styles.
It's a possibility theorists explore.
Yeah.
And this cultural cognitive lens profoundly shapes something very personal too, our emotions.
The untranslatable emotion words. This is always fascinating.
Isn't it? Language gives us labels for feelings, and some languages have words for complex emotional states that just don't have a neat single-word equivalent in English.
Like Schadenfreude from German, taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. We understand the concept, but we don't have one word for it.
Or mono no aware in Japanese, that kind of bittersweet, poignant awareness of the transience of things. Or Portuguese saudade, that deep, melancholic longing for something or someone absent.
And Danish hygge, that feeling of cozy contentment and conviviality. Does having the word make the feeling more real or more accessible?
That's the idea. Having a specific label might make that particular blend of feelings more salient, more easily recognized, maybe even something people in that culture actively cultivate. Gives it a cognitive foothold.
And this connects to the idea of emotional granularity.
Yes, exactly. That concept, associated with psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett, refers to the ability to differentiate emotional states with high specificity. Research suggests that having a richer, more nuanced emotional vocabulary, which language helps provide, is linked to better emotional regulation, better coping skills, better psychological well-being overall.
So more precise words for your feelings might actually help you understand and manage them better. That's incredible.
It seems language provides these vital cognitive tools for parsing our own internal landscape more effectively. It can potentially change our subjective experience of emotions.
That's a really profound link between language and our inner world. Okay, so language shapes perception, categorization, maybe even emotion. Does it also influence how we approach problems, our reasoning styles?
There's research suggesting it might. The underlying structural patterns of a language could potentially predispose speakers towards certain cognitive styles.
How would that work?
Well, compare, say, typical sentence structures in Chinese versus English. Chinese often relies more heavily on context, and subjects of sentences can frequently be omitted if they're understood. This is sometimes linked to what's called holistic thinking.
Holistic thinking, focusing more on the bigger picture, relationships, context.
Exactly. Emphasizing patterns, interdependencies. English, on the other hand, typically has a more rigid subject-verb-object structure. You usually have to state the subject explicitly. This is often linked more to analytical thinking.
Focusing on individual agents, discrete objects, linear cause and effect.
That's the idea. Research by people like Richard Nisbett has explored this, finding tendencies for individuals from East Asian cultural and linguistic backgrounds to lean more towards holistic reasoning styles, while those from Western backgrounds often lean more analytical.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If shown a picture of a fish swimming in a pond, an English speaker describing it might typically start with the main object. A fish is swimming. The focus is on the agent and its action. A Chinese speaker might be more likely to start with the context. There's a pond and a fish is in it. Or frame it more relationally. The environment or the relationship as mentioned earlier were given more prominence.
So the linguistic structure subtly guides what you prioritize in your description, reflecting a different cognitive focus.
That's the argument. It's not that one can't think the other way, but the language might make one approach feel more natural or default. And these subtle differences could influence decision-making or problem-solving approaches.
Fascinating. Okay, now, many people listening might speak more than one language. How does multilingualism fit into this picture? Does it change things?
Oh, absolutely. Multilingualism adds a whole fascinating layer. It's not just about knowing more words. Speaking multiple languages has demonstrable effects on the brain and cognition.
What kind of effects?
Well, a lot of research points to enhanced executive functions. This is like the brain's air traffic control system managing attention, switching between tasks, inhibiting irrelevant information.
So being bilingual can make you better at multitasking or focusing because you're constantly juggling two language systems.
That's the leading theory. The constant mental workout of selecting one language and inhibiting the other seems to strengthen these general cognitive control networks. It's like cross-training for the brain.
That makes sense. Any other benefits?
Yes. Studies also link bilingualism to increased creativity and better perspective-taking skills. Constantly navigating different ways of expressing things, different cultural nuances embedded in language, might make you more flexible thinkers, better able to see things from multiple angles.
Okay, cognitive flexibility, creativity.
Right.
What about long-term brain health?
This is a really significant finding. Research, particularly by Ellen Bialystock, suggests bilingualism contributes to cognitive reserve.
Cognitive reserve, what's that?
It's like building extra capacity or resilience in your brain's networks. And this cognitive reserve seems to help delay the onset of clinical symptoms of dementia or age-related cognitive decline, even if the underlying brain pathology is present.
Wow. So speaking multiple languages could actually help protect your brain function later in life. That's huge.
It's a major area of research, and the findings are pretty consistent. It doesn't prevent diseases like Alzheimer's, but it seems to help the brain cope better for longer.
That's a compelling reason to learn another language right there.
Indeed. Plus, multilinguals essentially have access to multiple cognitive toolkits. They can sometimes leverage the specific strengths or nuances of one language for a particular task.
Like maybe using one language for emotional expression if it feels more nuanced, and another for technical subjects?
Exactly. They can pick the best tool for the job. And finally, navigating multiple language systems tends to foster heightened metalinguistic awareness.
Meaning awareness about language itself.
Yes, an ability to step back and consciously reflect on how language works, its structure, its rules, and importantly, how it might be shaping thought. It makes you acutely aware that language isn't just a transparent window onto reality, it's a lens, or maybe multiple lenses.
So multilingualism doesn't just change your brain's function, it can change your awareness of the very process we're talking about today. That's a really powerful point.
It truly is. It brings the whole relationship into sharper focus.
Okay, so we've seen how language influences time, space, color, grammar, culture, emotion, reasoning, and how multilingualism adds another dimension. This isn't just theoretical, is it? There must be practical applications for understanding all this.
Absolutely. This knowledge has real-world value, for sure. Think about academia or just learning in general.
How so?
Understanding linguistic influence makes you a more critical reader. When you read an article, especially one translated or written across cultures, you can start to recognize how this specific language, say, English, might be framing an issue. You can ask, what perspectives might be downplayed because of this linguistic lens? Are there built-in biases in how this is being presented?
That's a really useful skill, analyzing not just the content, but the container, the language itself.
Exactly. And in the workplace, especially multicultural ones, this awareness is gold. It fosters better communication, helps avoid misunderstandings that might arise from different linguistic assumptions or communication styles. It's about intercultural competence, making sure you're on the same page semantically.
Even just writing an email to someone from a different linguistic background, being mindful of these potential differences could make a big difference.
It really could. And then there's the personal level.
Self-awareness.
Yes. Reflecting on how your own native language shapes your worldview, your assumptions, your habitual ways of thinking, that's incredibly powerful for self-understanding. And recognizing that others operate with different linguistic lenses. That builds empathy. It stops you from assuming your way is the only way, or the right way.
Understanding the filters. That seems key to navigating our incredibly diverse world with a bit more grace and understanding.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, we've covered a lot of fascinating evidence, but this field isn't without its debates and criticisms, right? It's not all settled science.
No, definitely not. It's a dynamic field. One major counter-argument comes from proponents of cognitive universalism.
Universalism. The idea that underneath it all, human minds work the same way.
Pretty much. They argue that basic cognitive processes like perception, memory, logical reasoning are universal across humans. In this view, language might influence how we talk about or categorize our thoughts, or maybe it helps us access certain thoughts more easily. But it doesn't fundamentally change the underlying cognitive machinery.
So, using the earlier example, they might say Google Emether speakers aren't fundamentally different spatially. Their language just intensely trains a universal human capacity for orientation.
That's one way they might frame it. It highlights the real difficulty in definitively separating what's truly universal from what's genuinely shaped or molded by language. The lines can be blurry.
Makes sense. Are there other important caveats or criticisms?
A really crucial one is the danger of linguistic stereotyping. This is so important. We absolutely must avoid taking findings about group tendencies like the German-Spanish bridge descriptions or the manana connotations and using them to make sweeping, simplistic, or negative generalizations about all individual speakers of a language.
Right. Just because German grammar assigns bridges a feminine gender doesn't mean every German speaker thinks bridges are inherently elegant.
Exactly. The research shows subtle average differences, maybe slight cognitive biases at a group level. It does not show rigid deterministic rules that apply to every single individual. People within any culture are incredibly diverse, and their thinking is shaped by way more than just their native language.
So engage with the ideas, understand the potential influences, but do it responsibly and avoid pigeonholing people.
Absolutely critical. And looking forward, this whole relationship between language and thought is not static. It's actively evolving, especially now with globalization and technology accelerating change.
Okay, this feels like we're entering new territory. How is technology changing things?
Well, think about AI language models, like the ones generating text everywhere now. How might the patterns, the structures, the stylistic quirks embedded in all that machine-generated language start to subtly influence human cognition over time?
Are we maybe adapting our own thinking to be more easily understood by AI, or are the biases baked into AI models starting to shape how we conceptualize things?
It's a profound question, isn't it?
Right.
We don't really know yet, but it's a massive ongoing experiment. And then there's social media.
Right. The sheer volume and diversity of language we encounter there, different dialects, slang, memes, constant code switching.
Exactly. We're exposed to this unprecedented linguistic mixing bowl, often in very rapid bursts. Could this constant navigation of linguistic variation be fostering new cognitive skills, like maybe greater flexibility? Or could it have downsides, like potentially impacting attention spans?
It feels like the ground is shifting under our feet.
It really does. Which means that you, listening right now, are living through a fascinating period where digital communication, AI, and global interconnectedness are actively reshaping this age-old relationship between language and thought. It's not a closed book. It's being rewritten as we speak.
So, pulling all this together as we wrap up, what's the main takeaway? If someone remembers just one thing from this deep dive, what should it be?
I think the core message is that language is so much more than just a tool for expressing pre-existing thoughts. It's an active, dynamic partner in the thinking process itself. It helps us carve up reality, structure our perceptions, focus our attention, process information, conceptualize feelings, approach problems. It's deeply interwoven with cognition.
So it's not just reflecting thought, it's actively shaping it in countless ways. And understanding that can actually empower us.
Absolutely. Engaging with these ideas can deepen your own linguistic awareness, enhance your ability to communicate across cultures, and just foster intellectual growth by making you question some basic assumptions about your own mind and how you perceive the world.
It helps us become more flexible, more insightful, maybe more empathetic navigators of this complex world.
That's the hope.
Which leaves us with a really potent final thought to chew on. Given this ongoing, accelerating evolution of language pushed by technology, AI, social media, globalization, how is the way we think, our collective human cognition, likely to continue transforming in the coming years and decades? And maybe more importantly, what does that ongoing transformation mean for how we understand ourselves and how we connect with each other across all our linguistic and cultural differences?
That's the big question to keep pondering, isn't it?